Hey everyone. So this is the Numenera design team here in front of you. Normally we would have done a live stream of the game that we have started a couple of weeks ago with our great GM Darcy Ross, but unfortunately Darcy is under the weather, and so rather than just having dead air, we thought, hey, this is an opportunity for us to chat a little bit about the upcoming Numenera 2 project that we have coming out. We've been working on this really hard. We're actually just putting the very final finishing touches on it now, and shipping it off to the printer very, very soon. We're very excited about this, and so we thought, maybe it's time to start talking about it and tell you guys what we've done. We talked a lot about this during the Kickstarter. If you were part of that Kickstarter, or if you even wanted to go back and look at the updates in that Kickstarter, there's a lot of information in there. But that that was then, and this is now. And so we can talk about the things that are actually for sure going in the book. It's not speculative anymore. It's a really coming out, and it's really come together really well. I am Monte Cook, and with me today is Bruce Cordell and Sean Reynolds. And we are, like I said, we are the design team that worked on this project. And so just to give you a very brief overview in case you're not familiar at all with Numenera 2, this is going to be an expansion of the original Numenera game. It's going to be inclusive of the original Numenera core book, but greatly expand upon it, as well as make some alterations to sort of accommodate some new kinds of play. And so it is such a big expansion that it is actually a 2-book set now. And so the names of those books are Numenera Discovery and Numenera Destiny. And Numenera Discovery is going to be the one that's more familiar to you guys if you're Numenera fans. It is basically the original core book, but we've made some alterations and changes in it, done a lot of updates. It's still all 100% backwards compatible with all your existing Numenera stuff, but we've done some changes as well. Sean, what's one of your favorite changes that we made to the stuff that is now in Discovery?
Most definitely is all the work that we did on the Jack. For the core book, the Jack was really kind of a hybrid between the Glaive and the Nano, and we wanted to make the Jack its own thing for Numenera Discovery. So Jack characters, they are really kind of a jack of all trades. They have a lot of new, really weird and strange abilities. Some of them kind of hint at stuff that you might see in a focus, but they're all kind of just uniquely flavored and special for the Jack. For example, Charles Ryan in our playtest, he had a great little combo. His Jack took an ability called Critter Companion, which gives him a level 1 creature companion. And he also took an ability that allowed him to link his senses to that companion. So he basically just sent his little flying companion around like he was the Beastmaster, used to scout areas and report back to him. We still wanted Jacks to be able to kind of have a Glaive leaning or a Nano leaning sort of feel for them. So if you have a Jack who has a couple of special Jack abilities, but you really like a lot of the Glaive stuff, you can still pick up some of the Glaive abilities, just like you in the Numenera core book. A lot of the Jack abilities were just duplicates of the Glaive, and a lot of their abilities are duplicates of the Nano. You can still do that, but we wanted to give 4 to 6 new Jack abilities at every tier. And we think what we got is something really fun and exciting that all different sorts of players are going to want to take a look at.
Cool. Yeah. I think, I would say one of the things that we did with Discovery 2 that I think people are going to really like is we took all of the types and we made them a little broader, a little less combat focused. Not every single ability, in fact, by a long margin, is combat related, giving people a lot more different options for movement-based abilities and interaction abilities and things of that nature. So I think maybe in particular the Jack ends up being way more flexible than they were before. Way you can go a lot of different directions with all the characters, but probably particularly the Jack, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. We added a lot of interaction abilities and a lot of exploration abilities to the Jack and the Nano and to the Glaive. But the Jack had a lot of focus because it was kind of of all the types in the original core book, it was really the one that didn't have a lot that is unique to it. And we wanted to bring that to the forefront and make the Jack the character that's really good at interacting with people, but can fill in combat in a pinch and is also good at exploration. So there's just a lot of possibilities for the Jack types now.
We had a lot of playtesters for Numenera 2, but a lot of the stuff that happened in Discovery is really the result of 5 years of people playing this game and giving us feedback too. So some of this stuff just comes from what people have said. Oh, I wish the Jack was more than just kind of half a Glaive and half a Nano, right? I wish the Jack could do his own thing. So yeah, that's cool. Now Destiny is the one of the 2 books that, and I want to be clear, Discovery is a standalone book. If you just want Discovery, you can play with that. You don't need both books. But Destiny is very much designed to be a companion volume to Discovery. And it pushes the game in a whole new direction that we are really excited about, which involves, even as the names sort of imply, while Discovery is about what Numenera has always been about, exploring the ruins of the past, Destiny is about building a new future, right? Building your characters and their community toward a greater destiny, so that the 9th world can become as awesome as the 8 prior worlds were. And so Destiny has 3 new types, which we've talked about, particularly in the Kickstarter. It's got new rules for crafting and building a community and managing a community and doing all kinds of really cool stuff with that. Bruce, what's your favorite thing, or one of your favorite things anyway, that went into Destiny?
Well, you were talking about the building all this stuff, and the rights, of course, kind of squarely talk to the entire new crafting system. Any character can craft, but rights are the best at it. And one of the things rights are able to do is develop plans. And one of the things they'll probably choose to get is plans for ciphers, because it turns out creating ciphers from all the various iotum and bits and parts that you can get from salvaging is the easiest thing you can do. And because they can create these ciphers, they'll often probably be asked to give their friends ciphers. And they'll be like, well, what am I going to do? But one of the great abilities that all rights have right out of the bat is called Always Tinkering. Always Tinkering is an ability that allows rights to create temperamental ciphers. And they're essentially ciphers, but they can create them in an hour. If they have any tools around them, they have some materials, they can just kind of mess things around. If they have about an hour, they can throw these things together. And it's a random cipher. It's like, pull out a card, random card. It's about 2 levels less than a regular cipher, generally speaking. And you can't give it to your friends, otherwise it just falls apart, because it's like, hold it like this. No, hold it like this. And then it falls apart. So rights can always fill out to their cipher limit with these temperamental ciphers, and they could be random too, which is kind of cool, even though they're lower level. However, if they spend actually some iotum, I believe they can actually get rid of that level limitation as well. They still can't give them to their friends, but if they actually burn through a little iotum they have, then maybe it can be just like a normal level cipher that they create in an hour. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and so the idea there is that the right just always has something up their sleeve that they can pull together and maybe help save the day. You used a lot of terms there that I want to make sure everyone understands. So tell us what iotum.
All right. So if you're familiar with regular the core book Numenera, you're going out into these ruins of the prior worlds, and you're salvaging these crazy things. You're finding bits and pieces, which are like basically buttons and switches and dials and other little pieces that you can use as basically currency. We call those shins. You can salvage that. You can salvage ciphers, which are these items which you can kind of get like one use out of them, probably not even the use that was anywhere near what the original purpose was, but you can get one use out of them, they break. These are the word ciphers. And of course, artifacts are something that they're a little bit more cohesive and you can get several uses out of before they deplete. So all these things in the Ninth World are kind of based around components which rights of the Ninth World have come to call iotum. And there are who knows how many different kinds of iotum. We actually list probably have 15, 20 different kinds of iotum in the Destiny core book. And each one of these iotum is something that rights can use in plans that they've developed also to create these crazy things, vehicles, more ciphers, more artifacts, automatons, installations like like a water purifier or a force shield, something like that, or something much crazier. So each of these kinds of iotums, they're some of them are more common. In fact, the most common is called IO, and these are kind of like almost like little power sources in a way you can think of them. And actually, iotum got their name from these most common little bits, these little pieces, shining, glowing bits. But some of the more higher level versions of iotum, responsive synth, apt clay, mimetic gel, all these other things, tamed iron at a very higher level, they each can be used in plants, but they each also have special, you might be able to get some weird usage out of them if you just use them in and of themselves. And if I were smart, I would have actually had that page up in front of me as I was talking, and I could tell you what some of these usages were. But for instance, you might imagine like some of the higher level, like there's something called a data orb, which is like a 9th level iotum. And I believe it pretty much just acts as a cipher if you have one of these. It might even count against your cipher level. In this particular instance, not all iotum do this. But if you just use a data orb, you can actually connect to the data sphere and have a question answered and burn it up and just use it that way as well. Other item you can gain one usages out of it that don't quite work quite so great, but maybe you can make yourself heavier or something, or maybe you know which way is north, or maybe you can substitute. I know mimetic gel you might be able to use mimetic gel for any other any other iotum of that level or lower without any sort of penalty. So they're all kind of like micro treasures, I think is a word that we use a couple different times. So that's pretty exciting in and of itself. Even if you're not a right, you can still say, hey, I want some mimetic gel because I'm going to slather my hut with it. I don't know why.
So the idea then with iotum is it's really just another reason to go on adventures, right? It's another reason to go into these dangerous and weird ruins because it's another thing to find to make use of, right? It's like they're the reason that you go on these quests, right?
It is. I mean, and you want to get item to create things, you want to get item to use it, but if you want to, you also probably just, some people want to get item because it's kind of become almost like a barter currency in some of these new communities that might actually, say, hey, we could use this. Okay, I'll give you all this IO I have if you, give me a cipher, something like that, right? You might be able to create a little barter communities in that sense.
Cool. So one thing that it definitely affects both books because it is something that affects all characters that I personally am really excited about. And one of the reasons that I'm excited about it is it's because literally it's something that people have asked for since the very launch of Numenera. Because one of the sort of core mechanics of Numenera is, of course, the GM intrusion. And with Numenera 2, we are introducing, in addition to GM intrusions, player intrusions. Sean, do you want to tell us what player intrusions are?
Sure. So if the GM intrusion is an opportunity for the GM to make a change in the narrative, to make it more exciting and thrilling, something dangerous happens, a player intrusion is the player's opportunity to not necessarily do something that affects their character, but that is affecting the environment or the encounter in a way that will help them. And do you want me to go into the mechanics at all, or?
Sure. Let's talk about it. Yeah, I mean, we have never publicly talked about player intrusions so far. This is kind of an exclusive thing here. So yeah, if you're watching this, let's tell you how they work, and maybe you can even start using them in your game right now.
So with the GM intrusion, the GM hands 2 XP to the player that's receiving the intrusion, and that player gets to keep 1 and gives the other 1 to another player. Or the player can spend 1 XP to refuse the GM intrusion.
Right.
To parallel that, the player intrusion mechanic is the player has to spend 1 XP and state to the GM, hey, I would like to do a player intrusion that will accomplish this. And we give a few suggestions based mostly on what a character's type is.
Right.
See if I can find a good example here.
I can think of one, right? Like if you're a jack and you walk into the local bar because you're looking for information, and there's a guy coming up to you who is got something of interest to you, you can do a player intrusion and say, hey, well, I've been to this little village once before, and I met this guy, and he's an old friend of mine, and so I started up a conversation with him, and that is a way for the player to sort of insert himself into the setting even more strongly, and it is something that will help him hopefully with the interaction that's coming with this guy.
Exactly. And some of those are more themed for type. For example, the glaive has a couple of suggested GM intrusions. One of them is, hey, you know what? You are surrounded by 3 foes and you're using a one-handed weapon, and you realize, wait, my person who trained me how to use a sword said, all right, so there's this perfect technique when you're standing here and they're here, here, and here. And if you use a player intrusion, like, oh, I have the perfect setup, and I'm just going to make attacks against every single person within range, just as my master taught me. That's an example of a glaive sort of player intrusion. It's really just meant to be a way to shift the focus of what's happening in the encounters in a more positive way, and let you kind of break the boundaries of what your normal character abilities can do.
I like them too because in almost every case, they're going to involve the player connecting with the setting even more, right? They're even the 2 examples that we just gave you, right? The player is either playing off of their own background or whatever to show that they're not just some weird alien thing walking through this setting, like I don't know, like a character in a video game just kind of wandering through and nothing is sort of real or connected to you. Instead, you are really a part of the setting. Pretty much with every kind of player intrusion that we suggest is you're developing your character more, and I really like that aspect of it. Cool. So let's see. We want we're gonna also just to give you guys a heads up if you're watching. We're gonna ask you guys for some questions here in just a few minutes. So go ahead and put those in the chat if you have questions, and we'll take a look at that. But before we get to that, let's talk. There's another really cool thing in Destiny that takes a concept that was in Numenera before, but really develops it. That's the way we handle followers. Bruce, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. So yeah, I think every single type now has the opportunity to gain followers if they choose that, or the Arcus, I believe, just actually as get some followers right off, I believe. But anyway, if you choose to get a follower, Arcus being one of the new types in Destiny,
right.
If you choose to get a follower, I think generally you get them at level 2. And basically this follower can help you in two different specific sort of settings. You can say, if it's a level 2 follower, they don't yet have the capacity to actually help you in combat situations, but you can say, I want this follower to help me whenever I make a Numenera crafting roll, or I want this follower to help me every time I have to make an initiative roll, right? So in the first case, the follower might be, is trained. Imagine this follower is trained in crafting Numenera, and they're out there helping you crafting your thing. And the other follower, of course, is on lookout, right? Or it could be the same guy, right? If you have 2 modifications for a level 2 follower, this guy might have those 2 modifications. Now, every time if you gain a follower, you'll have the opportunity to gain additional followers as you go up in level for your other special abilities. But your follower will automatically gain a level for every 2 levels that the PC gains. So if the PC goes to 4th level, their 2nd level, if they got one at 2nd level, it will go to 3rd level. And at 3rd level, every time the follower goes up in level, essentially, it can add 1 new modification. And if a follower is 3rd level or higher, it at that point it gains the capacity to gain to help you in combat situations, either in defense or in attacks of some sort. So that's pretty cool. So you can imagine that you can either, get 1 follower who you're advancing, or choose to necessarily have like 2 or 3 different followers surrounding you, depending on what your character concept is. And sometimes your followers aren't necessarily going to go out exploring with you, right? Maybe you're going to go out exploring because you need to get some certain item to, just need something to help finalize this plan you're working on. And maybe you leave the followers back to keep watch on the community or keep watch on the project that you've been working on for 2 months. You don't want it, to go bad, so to speak. So followers can be useful in such a wide variety of ways. They really extend the character capacities, capabilities as you're playing. You could set a follower up for messengers. You can, followers might have friends. It opens up the GM's ability to really complexify the plot of the situation. I'll stop talking now. Yeah, followers are very exciting for me too.
No, I think that's awesome. And it really ties you to the setting, to the community, right? It sort of really represents that you're a part of things and you're hanging out with all these people, and they recognize that you're awesome and you're doing awesome things and they ought to help you. Very cool.
I really like how followers let you kind of shore up a weak spot in your group of PCs if somebody doesn't want to actively take on a particular role themselves. But you might have a group of like all jacks or all glaives, and you're nano, or maybe you don't have a nano. You don't have anybody who understands the Numenera. You could get a nano follower and have one of their modifications be, oh, I understand the Numenera. And so instead of kind of having all this Numenera stuff go over your head, and you're like, okay, I'm just looking for ciphers, you can actually have a person who will interact with that aspect of the setting on your behalf, and they're your followers, so they're with you, and they'll respond to your directions.
Well, speaking of the setting, what does Numenera 2 do with the Ninth World setting? Have we just left it alone? Are we adding things? Are we taking things away? What are we doing, guys?
Well, we're doing lots of different things, starting with all new adventures in Discovery, right? So those great adventures will remain in the original core book, of course, available, but we have all new adventures in Discovery, and of course, all new adventures in Destiny as well, speaking of adventures. So lots of new adventures in both core books that you can utilize.
All right. There's plus, in order to kind of facilitate Destiny, we really kind of focused in on some various communities that you might be able to use as a part of sort of the community stuff that we've been talking about. Sean, can you think of a cool thing that we've added in that way for the setting?
Yes, definitely. One of the things is we have some pretty lengthy write-ups on some established communities, and my favorite one of those is Enfate, which is the setting of City of the Poison Eater. So if you enjoy the Poison Eater and you want to run some stuff there, we have a city write-up for it with all the NPCs and the rank interactions for how that would respond to a threat from a horde of Margur approaching, that sort of thing. We also have a bunch of little starter communities. So if you are kind of wanting to get your feet wet in finding a community that your players can kind of take under their wing and protect, there's a lot of small communities that are in need of resources, or they're being threatened by some sort of natural disaster or by a group of hostiles, and it gives you the opportunity to bring your players in. And once you've solved that problem in like an adventure sort of sense, you can decide, hey, well, we're going to sit here. These people need a water filter. These people need better walls. And you can start building up that community and make yourself integrated into the community. And it also allows you to start doing what we call long-term play, which is, hey, we know that we're going to build a wall around this town. That's going to take 6 months. Well, you know what? Let's just sit here for 6 months and we're going to build stuff. And it's not necessarily like you're spending every single day hauling rocks and putting scrap stuff together. You're going to take breaks, and someone might just decide, oh, you know what? I'm going to spend a month learning a new skill. I'm going to spend a month researching this other thing. I'm going to try and find a new plan for a cipher or an artifact that I want to build. We've really incorporated long-term play and the aspect of, hey, you're not always running around outside of civilized areas and doing stuff. Sometimes the innovation and the exploration and the learning that you're doing takes place in a settlement surrounded by hundreds or thousands of other people.
Right. Because since we have introduced the Wright, for example, who is going to spend a lot of time making items and whatnot, the last thing that you want is everyone else just sitting at the table saying, well, okay, I guess we'll just sit here for 2 weeks while you make your stuff. We have a whole chapter in Destiny that is a whole bunch of different options and ways to handle it, and GM advice on what the players can do, the interesting things the characters can do in between going into these crazy prior world ruins.
Right, and it's not like what they can do, it's what they probably want to do, right? I mean, there's so many different options for whether you want to just, if you want to work on mechanical stuff, or if you want to just like go out and look for iodom very simply, you want to work on relationships, right? There's all, depending on your player, you might have different things you want to do in long-term play, but hopefully there's something for everyone to follow. I think there is.
And there's really one of those options is really fun, because one of them is, hey, I'm just going to scout around in the nearby territory around this community and see if there are any ruins to explore. And so you do your long-term play. This person's building, this person's studying, this person's exploring, and you say, okay, we're done doing long-term play, and now we're going to go explore that ruin, just like how we would do with the Numenera core book or Numenera Discovery.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we've gotten into a place, I think, in a lot of our RPGs where we want to kind of be playing through, every moment of your character's life. But the truth of it is, one of the huge advantages of tabletop role-playing is that it's absolutely just as easy to say, okay, 6 weeks pass, as it is to say, okay, it's the next morning, right? And so we just kind of are making it a lot easier to do that and explain what happened during those 6 weeks. And I'm really happy with how that worked out.
I wanted to go back really briefly and clarify something that Sean mentioned, which was, or maybe it was Monte's, or maybe it was both of you, but we talked about in Destiny, the second core book, that we kind of are expanding these communities. And while it's true, there is a chapter on starter communities, which are kind of really hot takes on all these communities you can jump into. We also have several chapters on like 5 or 6 communities where we really delve in a way that we don't do in the original Numenera core book, right? Rather than 3 or 4 or 5 paragraphs for a community, it's 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 pages for a community. So Enthate has like 6 or 7 pages, Delend, Under the Changing Moon. And we really take the time to allow the city to really come to life and have NPCs, have the threats in that particular community, have the politics, the interesting things that can drive various different adventures and scenarios and, long-term play events. So that's kind of exciting as well.
I think that'll be really useful for game masters because you can just grab any of those cities and just suddenly have a whole bunch of information that you can suddenly utilize to have a whole, whole campaign's worth of adventures, really. All right, should we turn to some of the questions? I think we've got some questions coming out of chat. In no particular order, just going to start looking at some of these. Nick the Burner asks about how much more new lore can we expect in the new core books compared to the original? I think we're kind of talking mostly about the setting stuff here, which just kind of relates to what we were just talking about a little bit.
Well, I mean, if you're talking like just straight up information about people, places, that sort of thing, as we noted, there's probably 30-ish pages of new lore, even in Discovery, because of the new adventures, and in Destiny, which is the second core book. I would guess there's probably, gosh, 100-ish pages plus the adventures there, probably 150 pages of new locations, new NPCs. Oh, and I'm forgetting the creatures, right? I mean, there is if you want to look at it a certain sort of perspective, there's 414 plus pages of new lore when you talk about the new types, the new systems, and plus the new adventures that are in the previous book, right? It's just jam packed with new lore, honestly.
Shockwave 527 basically is asking, are there new foci and descriptors? Any of the old ones reworked? I think the answer is absolutely yes to both of those things. You guys want to talk about that?
I think that's a Bruce question.
Okay. Yeah, so we reworked, Sean and I reworked the foci in, we all reworked the foci in Discovery by, they're still very familiar, but basically we added more options to each one, right? So when you get to tier 3 and you get to tier 6, rather than just saying, here's what you get, you have the choice between this ability or this ability. Same is true at tier 6. So we kind of expanded out how foci work by just giving you a couple more options. And then, of course, we have all new foci in Destiny.
And Discovery.
What's that?
And there's a couple of new ones in Discovery, too.
Oh, right. Okay. And those also have the additional options as well. In Destiny, we tried to kind of give the foci we tried to speak to the themes, of course, of Destiny, which is exploration, interaction, and community, and crafting, of course. So you'll have themes that might be about protecting a community, building tomorrow, excavating the past. More exciting ones than that. I'm don't have that up right in front of me. I think, do we have brandishing an exotic shield? I don't know if that actually.
Yes, I was going to say that's a really weird. That's a fun one to talk about.
Did it survive? Okay. So lots more, and descriptors.
You touched on something that I think is really key too, and that is that change to the way that foci work, where at tier 3 and tier 6, you actually get the choice of one of 2 different abilities, which is going to give people a lot more customization. And again, this speaks toward kind of the feedback that we've been getting, from day one, which was, when you make a Numenera character, with a few exceptions, right, you make a bunch of decisions, and then you just kind of don't make a lot more decisions as you advance beyond that, other than skills to take and things like that. But this really opens up a lot more choices, makes it so that even if you've got 2 characters who have the same foci, they might end up being pretty different characters because they can customize it. So I think that's really cool. Let's see. There's a question from Lefty Twilight. When will we hear more about Amir and everything that was written for it during the Kickstarter?
Well, actually, Bruce and I just wrapped up work on the Trilling Shard about a week ago, and that's a Kickstarter exclusive. So,
yes. But as a reminder, that's a 60-some page book that basically we're made available to everyone who backed the Kickstarter. You want to talk about what went in that?
Yeah, Bruce took the point on that and had a really great idea that we should look at Elamir in basically 3 stages. There's Elamir the village, Elamir the town, and Elamir the city. And you can pick whichever version of that you want to run your campaign in or intersecting with. And over time, like you could look at the next stage of Elamir as something to plan forward. Like, oh, we could say, oh, you know, I know this event's going to happen in the next stage. I can start planting seeds of that in the narrative that I'm doing in my current campaign, so that when we advance the timeline a year or so, 5 years, and Elamir is changed into a city, the players will see the roots of what they planted appear in that. And so it's basically, it's 3 community write-ups of Elamir, 1 in each different stage. Plus, you have all the information on the NPCs and all the fiction, and there's new creatures, and it's very cool.
We not only had some Kickstarter backers who contributed at a level where they got to contribute a character that is now a part of Elamir, but there, you know, we put out the call during the Kickstarter to, you know, if you wanted to write, you know, your own sort of description of what happens during the, you know, invasion of the Martyr, or all these different things that we had happen in Elamir, you know, we would, you know, we put some of those in our Kickstarter updates. We really encouraged it, and man, people took off with that stuff and did some amazing stuff. So amazing, in fact, as we promised during the Kickstarter, we purchased a couple of the pieces from some of those writers, and that also got included in the book as well. So it is, the Shrilling Shard really ended up being a real community project, which is really fun. Let's see. So Jonato Sadre, I'm not really sure if I'm saying that right, asked, will the XP system have any changes?
I don't think substantially changed. I think we clarified some of the options that players had and gave some more advice for GMs about handling how people save and spend their XP. And then we added the player intrusion option, which is a way to spend XP. But the actual mechanics of what XP are used for in the game, I think, is pretty much the same.
Yeah, I was going to say, spend XP to trigger those player intrusions. I don't know if that was actually said before, but maybe it was.
No, but it you know, with XP being keyed off of discovery, not the name of the book, but the concept of making discoveries, I think that the very concept of the way XP works probably fits into Numenera 2 even better than it did originally. Mostly because we've given you even more reasons why you want to go out and make those discoveries, right? Because of Iotum and the reasons that you would want to go get that stuff. I think it all really fits, and so there was no reason to change it or muck with it very much at all. Rokolith asks, will there be content for nomadic settlements, or say people that live on the back of a giant robot or something like that? What about these sort of more unique settlements, guys?
Well, there certainly, you can use all the rules in here to say someone could live on the back of a giant robot. We have some communities written up that are on strange locations. There's one that is on some sort of a floating arcology right now. It's basically a remnant of a ruin of something else that people have just inhabited. It's one of these in-depth sort of things, and I think that one's called, I don't remember what it's called actually off the top of my head, Terracol perhaps. Oh, you know what? There is a nomadic. That's the very first one I wrote up, actually.
I was waiting.
So another one of these communities that we got a really in-depth look at is called Umdera, and basically it is a town that basically every 6 months to 2 years completely packs itself up packs itself on the back of this large beast they call a terrapede, and they follow these massive walking pyramids called Dream Titans across this great plain, because one of these Dream Titans kind of leaves this trail of this kind of glowing blue fluid they call elixir, and these Amdarans are able to process this elixir into all sorts of interesting things, including nutrition, so they use it for food and also other things. And so every time the Dream Titan moves, the one that they particularly follow, they will pack up and move. And when the Dream Titan settles down, they will build their community back up. So it's very nomadic in that sense.
I like how that write-up also has, some very nuts and bolts things about how that works, right? When it's just a matter of, all right, let's pack up and move. It's all sort of explained.
Right. So you have to, obviously, your community has to be planned around the fact that it can be you have to be able to take it apart, right? So it's not a regular community. It's built with the idea that it can be taken apart, put together, and with the idea probably that you're probably replacing parts of it a lot, because these things can only withstand so many reassembly bouts before they need to be replaced.
One of the other starter communities is basically a group of people living on ski boats in a salt flat, and they are just kind of moving from location to location looking for food. And they're kind of resource scarce, and yet also they are at the limit of the number of people they can support in their vehicle homes. So the PCs have an opportunity there to bring them food. They don't have any wood where they live. Like, all the wood they have is from trees that died out 30 years ago or so. So the PCs have an opportunity to come in and kind of rally these people and say, all right, we're going to find you some synth and some metal and make you like a trailer for your giant ski boat, or maybe it's another boat, just to give them some room to expand and perhaps move them out of this ecosystem where they're just really, really struggling to get by.
Cool. Yeah. And, just today we were talking about one of the first Numenera 2 supplements, which is called Building Tomorrow. And, we were talking about even taking some of these kinds of ideas even a step further, right? Because we have put out books like Into the Night and, Into the Outside, Into the Deep. And so what if there's a community, that's on an orbital platform, up in space? What if there's something deep below the ocean? That I think we can do a lot of really interesting things because it's Numenera, right? And that's kind of what Numenera is all about. Let's see. So Shockwave 527 asks, with the new Arcus type, will something like leads, the focus, will that be removed, or is it now obsolete? I think the larger question there is, how do we handle it when there are type abilities that sort of also encompass a focus like that?
Well, the leads focus you could double down on your ability to lead by taking the leads foci and take the Arcus type, and there's probably a descriptor that is bossy. Well, there's not something like that, right? But you could totally do that, and it totally works. I mean, we wrote the foci with the idea that these types exist, so does not become obsolete. It is actually more followers.
Right. It is actually sort of a core design principle of the Cypher system that there is more or less a focus that deals with the concept that every type has. And the reason for that is that it allows you to have a mixture, right? So I don't want to play, in this case, I don't want to play an Arcus, but I'd like to still be a leader. Then you can take this focus. Or the opposite, right? I want, exactly what you said, I want to double down. I want to be the best leader there could possibly ever be and have a ton of followers, right? I mean, even from the very core beginning of Numenera, there was, you could be a glaive who masters weaponry, right? So you're the the best fighter in the game, But you could also have been, and still can be, a jack who masters weaponry, right? So you can do some other stuff, but you're still good at weapons. So that idea, that concept of mixing and matching to either accentuate your strengths or maybe provide a completely new capability is really inherent in the system. Let's see, more questions. Moltar from Space Ghost says, are we going to see more social abilities across all classes? I'm sure he means types.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the things that I was tasked with while working on Discovery, in that we wanted to make sure that the glaive, especially, the glaive's abilities, all of its fighting moves were all about fighting. And we wanted to broaden what the glaive can do to make them have an interesting role outside of combat. And so just as an example, there is an glaive ability that lets you perform a feat of strength that looks really impressive and awesome. And everybody who sees you do that, you basically get an asset to interact with them for the next 10 minutes. So they're like, oh, that's the famous, really strong person, or the person who did that really cool maneuver with the weapon. I want to go talk to them because they seem really interesting.
Or that's that guy who can bend metal bars. I'm not going to mess with him. I want to treat him nicely because.
Exactly. So yeah, we wanted to make sure that every character type, while they have a bunch of abilities that are focused on the thing that they're supposed to be good at, everybody has options about every other tier for a combat ability or a social ability. So if you're naturally a combat focused type like a glaive, you're also going to have social and environmental or exploration sort of options. And if you are an Arcus, who is the super chatty social encounter sort of character, you'll have options that help you in combat and options that help you in exploration.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Let's see. So Captain Twitchets asks, will there be a glimmer or something like that that helps translate any of this to the strange? Well, there's already a PDF product that we made that allows you to kind of utilize Numenera concepts in the strange and vice versa. And Numenera 2 doesn't really invalidate that product in any way. You could still utilize that.
It's very true. Plus, it's all the cipher system. So
right.
Any of these new types, if you want to take their abilities or the whole, the types all together and add in translation for the strange, you could certainly do that easily without any, effort at all.
And same thing with like a player intrusion mechanic. Like you have the precedent for it there. You could start using that in the strange.
You could start using that in your strange campaign this weekend because we've already told you how it works. Yeah, cool. Let's see. So Snow Dogs asks, have any new books or movies or TV shows inspired you with ideas for Numenera 2?
All the time. If I wish, probably should have taken a record of all the things that inspire me. But right now, I've just watched Altered Carbon, and I thought, that's pretty cool. I'm writing Building Tomorrow. So in that sense, we'll see some inspirations from Altered Carbon. Plus, I listen to Science Friday all the time. A lot of other science podcasts, but I got a little behind on Science Friday, so I was just listening to a whole slew of those things and got a bunch of cool ideas for basically Building Tomorrow. It includes lots of different things, but one of the things it includes is lots of new plans, additional plans from all the many plans for creating all this crazy stuff in Destiny. But Building Tomorrow will have even more.
I wouldn't say I have any new things, but I'm kind of in an interesting position because I was a developer on the original Numenera core book, but I was just focusing on the mechanics. Like Monte and Shauna didn't really have a lot of the setting material written out. So me coming to work on Numenera now is kind of a new step for me. And so when I became part of the design team, Monte said, I want you to go and read Roadside Picnic and this graphic novel called Prophet. And those are very, very Numenera inspirational sort of things. And I did, and I totally get it. Actually, we're having a Twitch chat coming up about Roadside Picnic, which which is this Russian novel, and it has this crazy concept of something happened and there's all this weird technology left behind, and we don't know what it was used for or what it's supposed to do, and people are just trying to figure it out. And I mean, Monte listed it in one of the inspirational works in the core book, and so definitely, if you get a chance, read that and come to our discussion on Twitch.
Yeah, absolutely. Along with those in the original Numenera inspirations, you know, the section in the original Numenera core book, I believe, I could be wrong about this now all of a sudden, but I believe that a manga called Blame was included in that, and now that is an anime, which is on Netflix. That the reason that that is so very Numenera is that it's people, and they're sort of living on some kind of giant space station or something. You don't really know what it is, but the idea is that they're sort of the descendants of the descendants of the descendants of the people who actually built this place, and so they have very little idea of what this thing is or how, you know, how all the tech works. You know, so they're just kind of living this very difficult existence, and there's threats to their survival and whatnot, and they're making the best out of what they can cobble together from the past, which is a very Numenera concept. So I recommend that. That's on Netflix now. All right. We have a time for a couple of more questions. So Gnome Means Gnome asks, if you play Numenera 2 without focusing on communities, settlement, crafting, and making the ninth world a better place, are you doing it wrong? I'm going to say, you know, absolutely not, right? We're never going to tell you that you're doing something right or wrong. You know, you can definitely keep the game on that level of exploration and discovery that the original Numenera game is based on, without sort of this building aspect to it. And you're still gonna get a lot out of some of the options that we're offering here, right? I mean, the right, for example, is still a great character to have with you, because he's, you know, he or she's going to be making you ciphers and maybe even artifacts and stuff like that to help you. You know, the Delve is still a fantastic explorer of ruins and whatnot, and if that's the adventures that you want to go on, you know, that's great.
And having an Arcus along with you as you adventure across the ninth world, whether you're meeting, you know, entities within a ruin, or, you know, finding people in a weird community, or just helping your other player characters by inspiring them in a certain way, right? It's great to have all these character types. And of course, we would never say it's wrong unless we were wrong for the last 5 years. You know, when your core book came out. Obviously, we've all had a fantastic time playing that. We're just offering more options, but all the original options remain on the table.
Absolutely right. It's just, this is not a change so much as it is, here's a new path if you want to take it.
And I really like how you can use a lot of the stuff that we're introducing in Destiny kind of under the hood for your campaign. Because if you have a situation where the PCs go to a city and they need to get their hands on some new ciphers, you're going to have an NPC there who can trade ciphers or make ciphers. But now you're going to have the resources to say, oh, you want a bunch of fire detonations. I know that that's going to take, I can make those for you, but you need to bring me this item and that item and that item. And that gives the players a reason for their characters to go out and look for a specific thing. Or even if it's something not as common as a simple detonation, what if there's like a time dilation nodule that you need? That's like, okay, you need to get a K-on dot and you need some responsive synth and this and that. Like, oh, the only place to get that is in this horrible old ruin. Okay, we're going to go there, loot a bunch of iota and bring it back to the town. This guy's going to make this time dilation cipher for us so we can actually work on the next thing that we want to take care of. So it gives you all these other resources that you can plug into your game, even if the players aren't directly engaged in it.
Right. Actually, looks like Gnome Means Gnome. I'm not sure if this is the first question or if it's a follow-up, but you know, he talks about how right now his group is playing in Into the Night stuff where they're exploring the galaxy, and he's wondering if that will, if Discovery and Destiny will have any use for him in his campaign, or her, sorry. And I think the answer is absolutely yes, right? For all these reasons that we've talked about. In fact, I'll be honest, if I'm getting on a spaceship and leaving the Ninth World and going off to explore the galaxy, I really, really want to write along with me in case something goes wrong with that ship, because they're going to be able to fix it.
That's very true. Plus, a lot of things that, like, right now, if you're going off into the night, you're probably still drawing on a lot of other Numenera resources, like the Bestiary, maybe the Bestiary 2, the original core book for creatures, right? So you're already drawing things that weren't written in the book into the night. And that same will be true if they're still off exploring a galaxy or an alternate dimension. If you're using Into the Outside, plug, you're still drawing from material from all these other books, and that'll be true when you get to, if you were to happen to pick up Destiny, you'll find a lot that you can draw from there as well.
And if you play your cards right as the GM, any resource that you pick up, any book that you pick up, can be something that adds to your campaign. In our long-running Numenera campaign, my character, we were exploring space. We had a spaceship, and my character kept joking, "When are we going to go to the treasure planet?" If you want to introduce an adventure idea where, yeah, the PCs arrive at a treasure planet, but it's not, gold and jewels, because that's not really valuable in the Ninth World. Who knows what that is? But what if there's this huge stash of iota? I'm like, great, I have, a cargo hold full of weird components. What do I do with that? And then Jim's like, well, this is what you can build with that. And
right.
So stuff in your campaign.
Cool. I think we have maybe time for one more question. We kind of have to close things up here at the top of the hour. Shockwave 527 again asks, can you tell us a little bit more about the Delve? I feel like I've heard and understood a lot about the Arcus and the Right, but not as much about the Delve. Good point.
Okay, I had to unmute myself there. Well, as we briefly mentioned, the Delve is really great at exploration, and the reason is, there's basically, the Delve has the capacity to draw on a lot of different abilities that make them able to be better navigators, better at initiative, but better at both finding dangers ahead of time, evading those dangers themselves, maybe helping their fellow players evading those dangers, basically getting in and around things that a lesser person would be felled by, right? They're just tougher than the abilities they have make them a little tougher than other players. Delves also excel at actually salvaging. They're slightly better at breaking into that particular part of the crafting system, right? You need to salvage this item, and they're good at perception. They're good at finding things, and they're good at salvaging item as well. So that's kind of the overall view of the Delve. But yeah, if you're even if you don't want any other part of the book, I mean, if you want to explore ruins, the Delve is your guy, essentially.
I really like the Delve, and this kind of ties it back to what you're saying, Sean, about Roadside Picnic, which you guys are going to be talking about here soon. If you've read Roadside Picnic, and I really recommend that you do, there's a character type in Roadside Picnic called the Stalker, right? That they go and they explore these extraordinarily dangerous and weird places, and the Delve is absolutely sort of the closest thing that we have, and I will admit, very strongly inspired by the Stalkers in that game. I worked a little bit on the Delve and wanted to have abilities where you're in the weird Numenera ruin and there's a thing up ahead and it's gonna spray liquid fire on the group, but that it's the Delve who knows, if I just kind of MacGyver some jury-rigged thing and do that, I can make it so that thing is not going to fire for another round and everyone can hustle past it really fast, right? So they're survivors, and they're not just survivors as in I resist things really well. They are that, but they're also really good at making sure that everyone that's with them survives. And so they're really a good team player, which I also really like. Let's see. So, we got 1 minute left. There's only one question that I see here in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. I'm not 100% sure I understand it, but have we incorporated the data sphere into foci, descriptors, or places?
The data sphere seems like it comes up a lot in various things, right? Some people can gain an ability to gain a question from the data sphere. You can find abilities or items that allow you to speak to the data sphere. I was talking earlier about one of the items called a data orb, which is one of the item, which you can just use it up and talk to the data sphere with one question and not have that really high level, ninth level item anymore. But maybe that's why you wanted the item, was just specifically to ask that high level question.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the data sphere is an important part of the Ninth World setting, and so we basically kind of fold it in and utilize it wherever it seems appropriate in lots of different ways, in the in the items, in the setting, in the character abilities.
I feel like this is at least a GM intrusion in at least a couple different foci, maybe talks to machines. I could be wrong, so don't hold me to it. But I feel like, well, never mind. That goes against exactly what I was about to say. I was like, you can talk to the data sphere, but it lies to you. No, but maybe something like that.
Well, but it's still utilizing the data sphere, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But it doesn't mean that the data sphere is 100% reliable. So that's interesting. Yeah.
And I was going to point out that one of the options for building stuff is that your character gets a plan. It's not really like a blueprint or a set of instructions. It's kind of half cobbled together from a bunch of things. But sometimes you can just get the seed of a plan, whether it's from a bit of code from an artifact that you're salvaging, or directly from the data sphere. Like, you might just get a glimmer of, oh, if I put these 4 things together and then have these 3 fill in the blank bits that I'll have to figure out later, but then I can make a slug spitter artifact. And so the data sphere is something that is definitely involved as a possibility for what you're crafting.
I'm going to grab one last question only because it's a great transition into something I was going to say anyway. And that is a question, besides Numenera 2, are there any, well, he is asking if there's any other big surprises this year, but I want to talk about, I just wanted to mention very quickly, in addition to Numenera 2 this year, our big release, hopefully not a surprise, but maybe it is a brand new game that we're doing called Invisible Sun. And if you're already here on Twitch with us, so if you want to learn more about Invisible Sun and what this other new game is that we're coming out with, join us every Friday night. We are streaming a game that we as a team all played together. There's also a sort of an introductory video here on Twitch and on YouTube as well that kind of explains sort of the game system and the setting and whatnot. But please join us. It's every Friday night. It's called The Raven Wants What You Have. This upcoming episode is called The Ever Dying God. And if that doesn't intrigue you, then I don't know what will. As Sean mentioned, on Saturday, we have a Twitch program that we're calling Gamify Everything, and that's where we're going to talk about Roadside Picnic, kind of almost in sort of book club fashion, talking about the book, but also talking about how to directly use that in your game. And then on April 3rd, please join us here at this time, where we will continue our Numenera game, the one that was supposed to happen tonight. It's called Echoes Linger. We'll look for the next session on April 3rd. We all wish Darcy that she has a quick recovery. And thank you guys all so much for joining us with this very impromptu, kind of spur of the moment little talk about Numenera 2.
Thanks for the good.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for the great questions. I agree, Sean. All right. Good night.
Good night.